All right, welcome everyone to our first webinar in the 2021 Volunteer Engagement Series. I'm really excited about this one. I want to thank you all again for your support for this ongoing training opportunity. Last year, you guys encouraged me and we're really excited for this opportunity. We had almost 200 people sign up throughout the course of the year. So I'm excited that we were able to continue the series into 2021 and hopefully we'll be able to continue this for many years to come. So I do see a few new names, unfortunately not new faces, but I do see some new names on the participant list. So if this is your first webinar that you've attended, I want to let you know that we did record and post all 12 of last year's presentations. And we posted those on the Tennessee Commission on Aging and Disabilities YouTube channel. So you can go ahead and look back at any of those if any of those topics interest you. So this is a really exciting presentation for me. It's a topic that I've done some research on in the past. Some of you may have attended one of my presentations on this topic previously, but please don't leave. We do have some new data that I've found, some expansion on some old data. So even if you've listened to me talk about this topic before, please stick around and don't leave. I do want to do my typical disclaimer that these webinars are being recorded. So please be sure to keep information confidential when we're talking about our volunteers or our clients or maybe partners in the community. Also, everything that we talk about on these webinars is not a requirement for you to implement in your program. These are simply best practices through research and personal experience. So if you do like what you hear or want to implement any of the suggestions or strategies, be sure that you have the support of your supervisor and management before moving forward. We just had a comment saying, not sure that the recording is on. I do see that the recording is in progress on my end, but I appreciate checking in on that. So in the past, we've started these webinars with a recruitment tip of the month. I'm excited that the first 3 presentations this year are going to focus on recruitment strategies. So you'll be getting a new perspective from 3 new guests that are going to be coming to talk to you guys on the series. So instead of doing a recruitment tip of the month, we're just going to kind of jump right into our discussion, and we'll also be talking about ways to recruit the generations as we talk. So you will get some of that in this, but we're going to skip our tip of the month this webinar. So we're in a unique time where 5 generations are currently or soon will be in our volunteer workforce. There's been research on the 4 main generations that are currently in our workforce a little bit more in depth. And those 4 generations are our traditionalists, our baby boomers, Generation X, and our millennials. The newest generation, Gen Z or Generation Z, is still somewhat of a mystery. Since they're so young, there's not a whole lot of research that's been done yet. But toward the end of the presentation today, we are going to touch a little bit on Generation Z and the small amount of research that's been done so far. So we will get into that new generation, but for a bulk of our presentation today, we're going to be focusing on these 4. I always thought this meme in the middle was sort of funny. So for those of you who may not be able to see it, I know we have some people calling in. It's a meme from The Breakfast Club, great 80s movie. Just remember, for every boomer that hates millennials, there's a generation in between that hates you both. That is supposed to be funny and comical. It's not supposed to be serious. One of my supervisors, after she listened to me talk about generations, sent me that meme and thought it kind of fit with what we were talking about. So as I do research and I talk to more people, I hope that this presentation changes that mindset and looks at multi-generational volunteers more to close that generational gap and get more people working together than having, you know, our generations divided and, you know, the younger generation thinks the older generation is just too old school and they need to update their ways or vice versa. We want them all to be able to kind of work together as a team. So these next few slides I'm going to go through rather quickly. because it's a small kind of snapshot of each generation and some statistics. But I am going to send everyone this afternoon the presentation. I didn't do that this time. Normally I do, so you all have the information before the presentation. But since I really want this to be a discussion oriented presentation, I didn't do that, so you guys didn't have the answers, all the questions I'm going to ask. So just so you know, if you want to take notes, feel free to write down vigorously as we go through, but you will be receiving all of this data and information by this afternoon. So if you want to sit back, relax, and enjoy, perfect. If you want to take some notes, that's good too. So just a small snapshot, and all of this data in the next 5 slides are from the Corporation for National and Community Service. So it is a government operated resource. So traditionalists are also known as the silent generation. There's a lot of data on the screen. We're all adults, we can all read, so I'm just going to do a kind of small overview. So the traditionalists are the generation that volunteers the least. That is kind of sort of expected. You know, as we get older, we're not necessarily able to volunteer as much as we used to. However, they are the generation that participates most in local groups and organizations. So those that do volunteer do it more on a local basis. So we have about almost 6.7 million traditionalists in the volunteer workforce currently. Baby boomers. Baby boomers have a higher rate of volunteering than their parents at nearly 31%, but they are the generation that is most likely to do favors for neighbors and donate to charity. So as we think about the whole doing favors for neighbors, what I think about is the Meals on Wheels program, the transportation programs, helping people get to doctor's appointments and things. So those are the kind of how I can see baby boomers in our programs that I'm thinking of off the top of my head, how they kind of would merge and incorporate into our programs that we have. Generation X has the highest rate of volunteering at over 36%. So there's the generations that are volunteering the most. And they have a high rate of doing favors and donations as well, just like their parents and grandparents. So they've been influenced throughout the years to not only volunteer, but also to donate for those of us who may be able to accept donations. Millennials, we got some catching up to do. I am a millennial, so I won't be saying we when I talk about the other generations, but as we talk about millennials, I will say we, as I am a member of the millennials. So we do have the lowest percentages in all of these categories, but we're going to get there. I have faith that we're going to increase our statistics. And there are about 3 million less millennials that are volunteering right now compared to the other generations that we're talking about. And a little glimpse about Gen Z. So these are actually not true Generation Z numbers. So I was able to find the closest I could come to the full Generation Z was teenagers. I know that doesn't encompass all of Gen Z, but here's kind of a trending highlights overview of teenagers from the year 2015. So about a little over 26% volunteer. That gives us a pool of about 4.3 million volunteers from the teenagers, or at least part of Generation Z. So just with that little snapshot, I want to start us off with a poll, and I always like to, before we get into our discussion, see which generations we have with us. So if you could open up your chat box, I'm going to start a poll. And I'm going to open up that poll. And the question is, what is your generation? Are you a traditionalist, 1925 to 1945, baby boomer, 1946 to 64, Generation X, 65 to 81, millennials, 82 to 2000, or Gen Z, 2001 to present? So I'll give you guys some time to enter that, or you can put it in the chat box. A lot of you are doing that as well. Perfect. I do want to preface these years and generations. So while you guys are doing that, I'm going to give a little bit of background. So I know there's a lot of research that has a lot of different years and a lot of different statistics in terms of who's a baby boomer or who's Gen X, millennials, that kind of thing. So these years in particular that I use for my research are generations that are defined by, or really based off defining moments of a generation. So not necessarily every 25 years or something along those lines. So it does cause some debate, but these are the years I'm going to stick with. So go with me on that. Looks like we have a good majority of people who are participating. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. You guys have a little bit more time. So it looks like a majority, we're looking at Gen X. Got one traditionalist. I'm going to reduce that background noise. Okay, good. So we got some baby boomers, Gen X. A lot of the individuals who are typing in the chat box are also baby boomer and Gen X, a few millennials. All right, good deal. Thank you guys for participating in that. I do have one more question for you that's a little bit more complex, so let me open up that poll as well. So I'm curious to know, and you may not know this, gotta do this first, sorry. Yay, technology. There we go. Now I'm gonna open up this poll. So, and you may not know this off the top of your head, so I gave you a few more options. But what generation is a majority of your current volunteer force, do you think? So are they all traditionalists, baby boomers? Are they a mixture of traditionalists and baby boomers? Maybe Gen X primarily, a mixture of baby boomer and Gen X, millennials, mixture of Gen X and millennials, Generation Z? Or do you have a good solid mix of all the generations? So I know that makes it a bit more complicated how I phrase that, but I just had a feeling that most of us would say, well, you know, I have a good balance of two generations instead of it all just kind of being lumped into one. And that's, I think, what a good majority of our responses are a mix of traditionalists and baby boomers so far. Just going to go ahead and close that poll. You guys have just a few more seconds if you want to get a couple more answers in. Okay. Just saving these results for notes. All right, so yeah, it does look like a good majority of the volunteers that we have in our current workforce are the traditionalists, baby boomers, and a mixture of baby boomers and Gen X. So mainly that mixture of traditionalists and baby boomers, which is kind of where I thought we would all fall. But I just wanted to see if my assumption was correct. We never want to assume. Everyone knows what assume means, right? So thank you all for participating in that. That gives me a good idea of kind of what we're working with. So I appreciate that. So now I've asked you all to open up your chat box. I hope you all have kept that open because now we're going to start some more in-depth discussion. It is more fun to kind of do this presentation in a group. I normally divide everyone into their generation. We have a brief discussion and come back, but we're going to do this all together if we can. So now we're going to look at those four main generations, our traditionalists, our baby boomers, Gen X and millennials, and we're going to talk about their defining moments, their strengths and their weaknesses. And then once we talk about each generation's categories, we're going to talk about ways to recruit them, retain them, and recognize them. So hopefully this is going to be a good overall picture of each generation. More in general, of course, not every person in a generation is going to fit into every single thing that we're talking about, but it's a good kind of overview snapshot. So first things first, in your chat box, tell me some defining moments of traditionalists. Now, what we're looking at is years 1925 to 1945, but don't let those years throw you off. Some of the defining moments can overlap generations. So in your chat box, tell me some defining moments of traditionalists. The Great Depression, perfect. Well, not perfect, but yes. World Wars, living through the war, yep. Death of loved ones. War is a big one. So there's three main defining moments based on the research, and you can see kind of at the bottom, my source is going to be the same for defining moments in a lot of this research. Jessica Stallings has a great generations book, as well as the Centers for Nonprofit Management has a really good course on intergenerational volunteer management. So yeah, many of you mentioned these, as well as some nuclear bombs, industrialization, absolutely. So some of the defining moments from the literature, the Great Depression, World War II, and the Korean War. So now let me know some of the strengths that you see. We'll talk about weaknesses next, but let's focus on the strengths of our traditionalists. A lot of us have them as volunteers. So what are our traditionalist volunteer strengths? Endurance, great. Very responsible, absolutely. Resilient, that is an excellent word for our traditionalists, I think. Great work ethic, dependable, innovative, honest, great. Savers, absolutely. They have to make a little bit go a long way, which I know a lot of us in terms of our budgets and our finance and our funding can really learn a lot from our traditionalists on making a little bit go a long way. So a little bit more on the research of this. So there are some, literature references here, but I also, as I mentioned earlier, I've done this presentation at the state, regional, and national level. So some of the responses here are also from your peers. So some of these responses could be a little funny. But yeah, I think a lot of what you all mentioned in the chat box are shown here on the screen. Loyalty, resilience is on there, resourceful, caretakers, kind and caring. I think we can all agree with what you mentioned as well as what's on the screen. So tell me about some of the weaknesses. We don't like to talk about weaknesses. There's technically no wrong answer, but there is a wrong way to say things. So if you're talking about weaknesses, let's have it a constructive weakness. So tell me some of the weaknesses of our traditionalists. Resistance to technology, lower tech skills, feel they've not given enough, require loyalty back. Not only do they give the loyalty, but they expect it in return, absolutely. And notice how I'm not saying your name. I'm not saying, Joe said this or anything like that. So don't be afraid to say your opinion. I'm not going to call you out or anything. All right, let's see what some of the research says here. So some of the traditionalist weaknesses, reluctance to buck the system. So they do like that hierarchy system. So if you are their immediate supervisor, they're not going to buck the system and go over your head or anything like that. Resistance to change, I think we can share that amongst all generations. Hoarders, you can tell we're getting into some of the peer discussion here, and not as patient. High expectations of others was also mentioned. Reclusive sometimes. Okay. So I think we know how we can play off some of our traditionalist strengths, and maybe we can work on some of those weaknesses as well. So thank you for participating in that. We're going to have more discussion here in a little bit. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the recruitment, retention, and recognition for our traditionalists. So we talked about a lot of these recruitment strategies in the past, but a couple out-of-the-box ideas that I don't think that we've really explored before. We're trying to target traditionalists at shopping centers, supermarkets, and healthcare facilities. So I know there's a lot of, Kroger has a senior day, maybe I think Publix might as well. So those might be days once COVID calms down and we can actually do more in-person events and things for safety of everyone. Those might be some out-of-the-box recruitment ideas. Through the research, it is shown that this generation tends to support emergency relief, veterans, the arts, and advocacy efforts. So it doesn't mean that we can't get them to volunteer for other efforts. Those are just kind of the main ones that when surveys and research happens, that those are the areas this generation tends to lean towards for volunteering. Retention. So more formal communication is expected like letters and phone calls. So we kind of mentioned that in our discussion, loyalty, resilience, dependability. So they do like that more formal way of communication. I mentioned a little bit ago as well that this generation respects the hierarchy. So if you're the person that they report to, they're going to come to you for any concerns or anything like that that they have, and they're going to have faith that you're going to resolve those issues. So rarely, unless something is just really bad or you're not addressing a certain issue, are they going to go over your head. So ask them about their lives and their experiences. Get to know them, make them feel needed. A really good way to retain them is looking at maybe mentorship or higher leadership roles for this generation. Recognition, going along with our hierarchy theme, if you can get your upper management, like your supervisors or even your executive director, if they have time, which I know that sounds crazy that people actually have time to do things, but if someone at upper management would be willing to write a volunteer of this generation a note or give them a call, they would really, really take that to heart and know that they're appreciated because the higher ups are recognizing the things that they do. They want to leave a legacy. So maybe when they decide to retire from volunteering, let them know how important their work was and your plans to make sure that the work that they've done is carried forward after they leave. They do like more of the formal public events, which is different than most other generations. We're leaning toward not doing so many formal events and doing little personalized things, but this generation is used to the banquets, honoring the years of service, a 5-year pin, a 10-year certificate, things of that nature. Anything anyone else would like to add about the Traditionalists? Am I way off base? Am I pretty on track? Alrighty, so we're going to move into the baby boomers. So tell me in the chat box some of the defining moments of our baby boomer generation. We do have quite a few baby boomers on the call with us today. So what are your defining moments? Again, don't let the years of baby boomers necessarily restrict you in the defining moments. But we're looking at, oh gosh, what did I say? 46 to 64, I believe. Got civil rights, Vietnam, 9/11, Woodstock, Kennedy assassination, women's liberation, landing on the moon, flower power, love it. Good. I think we've covered a lot that the research also shows. So yeah, moon landing, civil rights, Watergate, Woodstock, those were mentioned, Cuban Missile Crisis, space exploration, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. There you go. Hippie movement kind of goes along with that. All right. Excellent. So now what are some of the strengths of the baby boomers? I think we had one. Dependable was the strength of the baby boomer, absolutely, unless you're talking about the Traditionalists, which is, I think, is true for both generations. So some of our baby boomer strengths. Work ethic, loyal. They definitely get a lot of the same characteristics that have been passed down from their parents. Individualistic, okay. Common sense, like that. Beginning of progressive, active, excellent. More free time, empathetic, overprotective parents. All right. Team-oriented. Perfect. All right, let's see what some of the research says here. Yep, the first two were already mentioned. Competitiveness. So there is some research. This generation definitely had a higher focus on education. Maybe they were some of the first in their family to go to college, or they want their kids to be the first to go to college. So there's some some, and competitiveness isn't always bad. Collaborative, adaptable, cultivating personal relationships, change, goal-oriented, absolutely. How about some weaknesses? Living on credit, first latchkey kids, okay. Self-centered. I'm going off what the chat box says. No. This is usually the part where it's in person, where a lot of people clam up in the room and they're just like, we're not talking bad about the baby boomers. Oh no, you don't mess with the baby boomers. Resistance to technology, resistance to rules unless they think it's the correct thing, okay. So that reluctance to change, I think, is also inherited from the parents a little bit. Savvy on money, okay. Questioners. Let's see what the research shows us. Difficult with change, low tech, not as flexible, conservative, authoritative. The work ethic, you could see that the work ethic is both a strength and a weakness. So some people in the research shows that, you know, work was very important to the baby boomers, maybe a little too important in some cases. I'm a workaholic. I always think that I'm a baby boomer in a millennial body. When it comes to the racism, it's not that this generation is racist. I think it goes back to the civil rights and that era. So by no means is this slide saying baby boomers are racist. It goes along with the civil rights movement. Gullible, stubborn, materialism. Alrighty. Let's talk about how we can recruit and retain and recognize our baby boomers. So it's interesting, I kind of found through my research and talking with a lot of individuals, baby boomers can almost be split down the middle in terms of age, and half prefer kind of a more formal way like their parents, and the other half has adapted to the new technologies and prefer a less traditional method of things. I don't know if you all can relate to that. You have some maybe baby boomers who don't really like technology as much, and then you have the other baby boomers who are like, yeah, I thrive on technology. I don't know why you think I can't do something on the computer. I'm great at all of this stuff. So I've noticed that, especially in group settings. It's like, oh, no, you guys are wrong. You know, baby boomers can do all these things. So I do think it's kind of a split down the middle almost. So recruitment, they do look at more high-profile media and technology. So you're looking at TV, radio, things of that nature. Look for your corporate or business associations, civic organizations, fitness wellness centers, things of that nature. They tend to support first responder organizations and do some more administrative duties, is what they lean toward. Again, not every single baby boomer is going to want to do all your administrative work, but those are some things that the research has shown baby boomers tend to support. So like I said, not as formal communication as their parents, but they do like face-to-face and phone call communications. Maybe some email dabbled in there. Definitely respect their time and talent. So remember, education was a big strength for them. They really think education is important, as many generations do. So they have the experience, they have the talent. Make sure we hone in on that and use their strengths. Make them feel needed, flexibility with time, and new learning opportunities. Again, going back to that education, they like to learn new things. Recognition, feedback. I know a lot of us don't think, you know, our feedback or our evaluation.
How many packages get lost in the damn mail?
I know.
Oh my. Ooh, sorry about that. Had a little side conversation there. So we don't necessarily think of feedback as recognition, but if you have that positive feedback to really show them that what they're doing is good and they need to keep up what they're doing, feedback can be a good form of recognition. Highlight their goals and accomplishments, especially if they've worked on a large project or committed a lot of time and expertise into that project to make it a success. And thank you notes for sharing their time is a really good way to recognize the baby boomers. So anything additional, baby boomers, that you want to add? Okay. And we're going to jump right into Generation X. So Gen X, what are your defining moments? Again, events can overlap generations, so no wrong answers in terms of our discussion. Latchkey kids, okay. MTV, alternative rock videos, good old MTV. The AIDS epidemic, Reagan, yep. Challenger disaster. Yep, they were on the front lines of technology. Iran hostage crisis. School bullying. Good. Watergate, yep. All right, let's see what some of your peers in the research. So a lot of these were mentioned, Watergate, a little bit of what's birth and deaths of disco. I thought that was kind of fun. And then you can tell when it goes from, you know, the research to the peers when you get into banana clips and big hair and raves. But yeah, I think a lot of divorce is more prevalent in this generation. Not necessarily they're getting divorced, but maybe parents and things of that nature. So yeah, excellent. Now, what are the strengths of Generation X? We have a few. Well, actually, no. Oh, never mind. That was the wrong poll. I think we have a few Gen Xers with us. So what are your strengths, Gen X? Motivated, self-reliant. Often the neutral party. Higher education oriented, more used to multiculturalism. I do like the neutral party of Gen X. Gen X isn't super controversial, but I mean, they will state their opinions, but they're not going to be overbearing about it necessarily that I've experienced, unless we talk about my sister, but we won't go there. They definitely want to help. All right, let's see some strengths here. Value freedom. So I think a lot of what we've mentioned is kind of here on the screen. This generation really appreciates the work-life balance. So, you know, if work ends at 5 p.m., work ends. If you want to call us at 5:30, or call them, I shouldn't say us. I apologize, I'm not Gen X. But yeah, at 5 o'clock, workday ends. So if you call after 5, I'm going to call you back the next morning because then my life starts after work. So that really a healthy, not a bad, you know, I just don't want to work anymore, but a healthy, you have to have that work-life balance. They're not afraid to ask why. Okay. Unlike the traditionalists who don't want to buck the system, Gen X, in a way, I mean, not completely bucking the system, but asking why is a way for the traditional system to be like, well, why are you asking why? We've done this, you know, the same way for decades. And Gen X is the first generation that says, yeah, but why? We could do it a different way. Independent, we mentioned that. Nurturing, self-starters. Perfect. Oops. I already gave you a little brief glimpse of the weaknesses, but what are some of the weaknesses of Generation X? So weird with silence and it's not a verbal group discussion. Less parent oversight, meaning they don't like to be micromanaged as much, okay. Skeptic, not trusting, often apathetic. Sandwich generation, they're caring for their parents as well as their children, excellent. High teen pregnancy rate, lots of stay-at-home moms, okay. Research, get that up here. Pinnacle of institutions. So reluctant to trust. I think a lot of people kind of touched on that a little bit with being, skeptic and not as trusting. If we look back at their defining moments, there were quite a few more scandalous things and some not so great communication from, government and things of that nature. So yeah, it has a little bit of reluctance of trust. Lack of attention to detail, let their kids move back in. I don't know if that's a weakness as much as it's really helping kids. Credit card, mom guilt, helicopter parents. Yeah, the single parent homes, I think that has to do with the mom guilt. Previous generations, you may have had a lot more stay-at-home moms. Now, men and women are both in the workforce, so there is some guilt that happens there. Helicopter parents are starting. If no one knows what a helicopter parent is, they kind of hover around their kids to make sure, they don't fall. And it's another way of saying an overprotective parent. All right. As you can see from all of the generations, there are way more strengths than there are weaknesses in terms of our generation. So let's see how we're going to recruit, retain, and recognize our Gen Xers. So ways, to recruit. So they're looking at less formal ways. The internet is a key thing, flyers at places that they like to go, employer volunteer programs. So if you can find, I know Walgreens has one, there's quite a few corporations that give their employees, a monetary gift or maybe some extra days off if they volunteer so many hours throughout the community. So looking at those type of organizations, grad schools, a couple things that were more out of the box thinking that I didn't think of were the child care centers and pediatricians' offices. So this generation really values including their children in things. So trying to target them where they're at in terms of where their kids are and where they may be taking their children as a way to recruit as well. They tend to support health services, so Hello Ship SMP programs that we have in our network, animal rights, environmental protections, things of that nature. Retention, the communication is a little less formal, emails, voicemail, social media communication, things of that nature will get their attention. Definitely want to be flexible with time. As someone mentioned in the chat box, they're the sandwich generation. Not only do they have to care for their children, but they may be the caregivers of their parents. So while they want to give back to the community, they have such a limited time that we really have to be flexible with our schedules. Connecting with people that they work with. So, family is very important to them. Whoever they volunteer with is going to be kind of their social circle. So allowing some connection and communication between the volunteers to develop those relationships is important. They want to be attached to a meaningful cause. And if you are able to have opportunities for them to volunteer with their kids or take them with them to the office, if they're doing some admin work for you, not necessarily that their child has to help with the admin work, but hey, I'm going to be in the office for 2 hours. Is it okay if my son comes with me? I'll have things for him to do to keep him entertained, and I'll volunteer, but it's okay if he comes into the office. Things like that will really keep Gen X in our programs. Recognition, they like to be recognized in a group. This is more if you're doing a public type recognition, they want to be recognized in a group rather than individually. They really want to be showed how their actions relate to the overall success, but also how what they've done really has helped the community as a whole. They like that private personal appreciation, and they want feedback to be ongoing rather than, instead of an annual evaluation or feedback, make sure you talk to them after every event that they have. Or at the end of the day, if they're in the office, hey, how'd your day go? Is there anything that we can do to help you out the next time you're in the office? Kind of a thing. Any final thoughts on Gen X? Okay. Moving along to our millennials. Now, this is where a lot of the generations like to gang up on us millennials. So be as gentle as you can be. All right, so defining moments for us millennials. What do we got? Internet access, yes. We are in the throes of that internet and technology advances. 9/11 for sure. Columbine, school shootings, cell phones, gaming. Globalization. OJ trial, Clinton impeachment. Some scandals. Reality TV. I'll just throw that one out there. The war on drugs. Iraq war. Absolutely. Let's see what some of the research shows us. So yeah, I think a lot of what you guys said is up here. Terrorism in general, social media, the market crash, family structure is a little bit different for our generation. Gen X maybe started, not necessarily the trend, but you were seeing more possibly divorced families, single families. Millennials are seeing more same-sex parents, in addition to maybe the divorcees and things of that nature. So family structure is a little bit different. Princess Diana is also in our generation. Great. How about our strengths? What are our baby boomers, or not baby boomer, I'm not a baby boomer, excuse me, the millennial strengths. I want to be a baby boomer so bad. But what are the millennial strengths? Technology, larger network, innovation in technology, yeah. Focus on society needs, absolutely. Cause-driven. Strength in numbers, we do like to work in teams, we like to work with our friends. Education-focused. Can mobilize large groups. We are good at getting those grassroots efforts going. We do marry later in life. I am a perfect example of that. All righty, let's see here. A lot of these were already covered. Networkers, tech savvy, creative, civic minded. Foodies, I don't know if that's a strength that's necessarily needed, but that was mentioned. If you need help with whatever kind of lunches you want to serve at your training, ask a millennial. We're really good at food, apparently. And we're more aware and accepting of mental health was one that I thought was really interesting that was mentioned. All right, how about our weaknesses? Here we go. Open up the floodgates for this one. Usually get a lot of feedback. Entitled attitudes. Perceived as self-absorbed. I like that you put perceived in front of that. I appreciate it. Set in their opinions. Me-oriented. Less respect to hierarchy. Okay. Just because I'm saying okay doesn't mean I agree with everything, but I respect everyone's opinion. Why? Yeah. We do like to ask that question. Kind of reminds me of those cartoons when one of the little girls asks someone a question, well, why? And they answer, why? Yep. Unteachable sometimes. We can be stubborn, as mentioned previously. Instant gratification. All right. Independent, not as interested in joining a program, but rather create one. Okay. Go ahead and pull up some of these results. So I think a lot of these were also mentioned in one way or another. FOMO, so if some of you don't know what FOMO stands for, that's fear of missing out. There's that instant gratification, student loan debt, self-entitlement, technology obsessed. Okay. All right, so how are we going to recruit, retain, and recognize our millennials? So something new in terms of recruitment. So like I mentioned earlier, a lot of these are things that we've kind of already talked about before, but there are a couple new ideas that are thrown into the mix. So something new that I saw for millennials is reaching out to those young professional groups like junior chambers or urban leagues that millennials are a part of. I think there's a certain age cap for those professional groups. So it does kind of touch a majority of millennials right now. And eventually, millennials will phase out of that and we'll be able to get some Gen Zers too. So we also want to look at a lot of the similar places to our Gen college campuses. We do good peer-to-peer recruitment. Like I mentioned before, we want to volunteer with our friends. So we might be good recruiters just in ourselves. We tend to go for more human rights, child development, victims of crime and abuse. So the CREVA program might be a good fit for us millennials to join. Retention, we are way less formal in terms of how you can communicate with us. So email, text, social media. I actually have found that texting a lot of my millennial volunteers is a way to get them more engaged rather than email. Flexibility in time as well as in the workspace. So we do now, of course, everyone is moving to more work from home or volunteer from home because of COVID, but millennials kind of like that before as well. So if there's any kind of remote volunteering or virtual volunteering opportunities, I think millennials will jump at those opportunities. And we are going to have a presentation here in a couple months about virtual volunteering. So hopefully that'll help get some more ideas of how we can do that in a more cohesive effort instead of kind of the sink or swim that we've kind of been thrown into because of COVID. Or hopefully this works, we'll see. But there is more information on that to come. They do like that connection for the people that they work with, as well as the people that they serve. So if you do want them to do a ride, or if you want them to deliver a meal, not only are they going to connect with their fellow volunteers, but they're also going to try and build a relationship with the people that they're serving, the person that they're riding with, or they're delivering the meal to. And they like avenues to give feedback. So not only, can you tell us some feedback, but we're also going to give you some feedback as well. Some recognition, keep that reinforcement positive, that we're doing good things. We will take the feedback, but make sure that if there is something that we need to change, that you recognize that we changed it in a positive way. Show group and individual impact. So we do like to work in teams. Again, we like to hang out with our friends and do projects. But we also like to get credit for the parts of the project that we've accomplished. So yeah, it's a group effort, but I did the catering, so I want to be recognized for that. And then Joe did, the registration. So not only as a group, but also our individual impact. And a good way to recognize us is to give us more responsibility, so that we've proven ourselves that we can get a task done, give us an opportunity to have even more responsibility to continue to prove ourselves and that we're valuable. Any last thoughts on millennials or any other generation? That's going to conclude for a good chunk of our discussion. So I do appreciate you guys participating in that. Hopefully that kept you engaged and it wasn't just me, talking and you have to listen to a talking head the whole time. All right, so let's dive a little bit in our Gen Z. So like I said earlier, they're a bit of a mystery. So being so young, they're just starting to volunteer and there's really limited research on this generation so far. So this is the most diverse generation in history. And there's diversity in all aspects. You got your race, ethnicity, gender, religion, you name it, the most diverse in history. I like to think that because of the diversity in this generation, they will be more accepting of individual differences and be able to really work with a wider group of people. So community service is also a concept that they've heard a lot and they've really grown up with. And in some cases, they've been required to do it, whether it be for school or other projects. Because community service, they know about it, volunteering is not going to be a foreign concept. So when they call you or contact you in any way to ask you for a placement, they may not have extensive experience, but I bet they're going to have something that they're going to be able to tell you that they've participated and done something in their community. That gives a little, even though they're young and inexperienced, they've done something to show you that they're going to be a good bet and that they'll be valuable to our programs. So while millennials and Gen Z are kind of thought to be tech-savvy generations, which we are, we had to kind of adapt to it. So it wasn't brand new kind of right out of the gate. Whereas Gen Z has been immersed into a mobile environment from the get-go. So when I think about Gen Z, I get really excited because I'm an aunt of 6 nieces and 2 nephews, and I cannot wait until the day that they're old enough or I ask their parents' permission. Hey, do you want to come and volunteer with me for something, and we can do it together? And I'm sure many of you feel the same way about either your kids or maybe even your grandkids. My oldest niece is 11. So I'm giving her a couple more years, but I'm excited to get her involved and see if it's something that she'll take an interest in. And then she's got a lot of friends, and she can, get them involved as well. So like I said, still in history, not a whole lot can really be said. That may or may not have been very helpful. But I'm sure as more research comes out, we'll be able to talk about Gen Z more in depth in the near future. Some misconceptions. I think a lot of us fall into these traps. I know I do. The first thing is the common misconception is there's only one way to communicate. So I love this image, and it shows that there are people who prefer different communication methods. So write me, call me, email me, text me, that kind of goes along with the 4 generations that we're talking about. Oh, I'm sorry, we're going back to Gen Z real quick. There was a comment that older Gen Zs are misattributed to being millennials. Gen Zs are in college now. Yeah, so there's a little bit of confusion between who's a millennial and who's a Gen Z. So that's also going to be something that, as the research shows, we'll be able to hopefully have not maybe a clear line, but be able to differentiate the millennials from Gen Zs in the future. I agree. So as you're working with your volunteers, and I know we've mentioned this in the past, but something on your volunteer applications that I would strongly encourage you all to update if you haven't already, is asking them their preferred method of contact. So you may have someone who would rather be called every time that there's a meeting, or email is probably going to be a good majority, and it's the easiest. But you may also have people who just, shoot me a text and I'll be there as a reminder. So I know personally, I rely heavily on email because it's the easiest way, as we talked about, just to get the message out. But I need to be more proactive in expanding how I reach out to people, because if I don't get a response back and then I'm like, I don't understand what's going on, I need to be more adaptive and flexible with my communication, for sure. Another common misconception is millennials, Gen Z, even Gen X, we don't just want to do your tech roles. Yeah, we're tech savvy. Yeah, we know about social media and things. But we don't want that to be the only thing that you want us for. So be sure that there's opportunities to be able to learn more and do more activities to interact directly with the clientele rather than relying on, website development or social media people. We do have those skills, but we want to be more embedded in the interpersonal relationships of the organization. And kind of the opposite of that, or similarly, really, not all traditionalists and baby boomers want to stuff envelopes and file papers. So they don't want to just do all the busy work. The wealth of knowledge and experience that those 2 generations have can help improve policies and protocols, streamline processes that may seem to take forever, and so much more. I remember when I was working at the regional level, I believe it was a baby boomer, I was working on reporting, and I just remember I was just so overwhelmed I couldn't quite get the grasp of it. And she sat down with me and said, hey, this is way more easy than what you're trying to do. And she taught me how to streamline my reporting a little bit better. So tapping into that experience and that expertise rather than, hey, we're doing a mass mail out, we need all the hands we can get. I'm going to look to my baby boomers and traditionalists to come in and help stuff envelopes. So we've talked a lot about the differences in the generations, but there is some common ground that can benefit everyone, no matter which generation that they're in. So one of the big ones that we've already touched on a little bit already is each generation really needs a flexible schedule. Now, you may have set times, of course, events, you can't just say, oh, show up to an event whenever you want. You need someone there at the beginning, the middle, and the end. But instead of saying, we have a 4-hour event, we need you there for all 4 hours, maybe you can divide that event up into 2 2-hour shifts, something along those lines, to give a little bit more flexibility to those individuals who may not have a whole lot of extra time. Because maybe, they're spending time with their kids or their grandkids or friends, family, school, or the other million obligations that we all have. That volunteering really has to fit into the volunteer schedule rather than the other way around. So I think having that mentality would really help us be able to retain our volunteers by working those flexible schedules. Not easy. I'm not saying that it's like the magical cure or with the snap of your fingers it's going to get done, but trying to work that in, I think, is going to be very helpful. Another trend that we talked about in the past is more people are looking for short-term or episodic volunteer opportunities rather than long-term commitments. So easing a new person into a role can be helpful in keeping the volunteer there. So rather than we need you at the senior center for 2 hours every month for a year, hey, can you go to the senior center for 2 hours this month? And then follow up with them. Hey, did you like it? Did a lot of people come and talk with you? How did you feel? Oh, it was such a great experience. Great, can you do it next month too? And then another great experience. Hey, can you do it again? So rather than kind of having that long-term expectation, see if it's a gradual way to keep them engaged and keep them coming back. Understanding what the volunteer wants out of the experience of volunteering in our programs is key. This can be done through the interview process, how you compose your volunteer role descriptions, and talking to them regularly about their work with the program. So we need to understand the volunteer's needs. We know our needs. We need someone to do a meal route on Fridays. We also need to understand the volunteer's needs. Well, my grandmother just passed, and I really want to help someone who's older in the community who doesn't have someone to watch out for them. Perfect. You're meeting a need that we have, and we're also being able to fulfill a need that you have. One of the last common overlaps is trust and respect are valued qualities volunteers looking, trust and respect are valuable qualities volunteers look for in a leader. So we can gain their trust and give them respect, as well as take the time to appreciate what they're doing. Be hands-on in their training, open to their feedback, positive and constructive when we give them feedback, and so much more. So building that trust, getting to know them, respecting their experience, their knowledge, and everything that they bring to the table is going to be key for all of these generations, for every, not even when we talk about volunteers, just when we talk about people in our life in general. So to kind of wrap up and kind of close our discussion on intergenerational volunteer management, it's really about having a place where everyone is welcome. We embrace that all volunteers are unique, and they have unique differences and experiences that we can learn from. We can also look at their strengths. We can look at their weakness or their strengths for placement, but we can also help in their weaknesses through the continuing education and improvement efforts that we've talked about. So how great would it be through our volunteer programs, we can work to close the generational gap and be able to work as a team to accomplish our mission. Each generation can learn so much from one another, and we can create the environment where it's safe to share ideas and thoughts and concerns with our groups to resolve issues, implement innovative strategies, and reach goals we never thought possible. So it is a way that we can bring every generation together, but we have to make sure that it's that safe space and that we're not going to talk only and focus on those weaknesses and things of that nature. But I really think our programs can help close that generational gap and really be overall such a great success if we have more of a mixture of all of our generations. So I'm going to do just a couple of my usual kind of wrap-ups toward the end, but instead of sending an evaluation to everyone, I didn't get a whole lot of responses. I'm going to open up a poll that kind of has a presentation evaluation, just 4 short questions. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up for everyone while I kind of go through the last little thing. So make sure you scroll down in your polls, start answering those questions. All right, so to kind of wrap up the presentation as well, we're going to look at some data updates. So I'm working on that, starting that annual volunteer impact report that I talked about last month. So please continue to send in your data, the number of volunteers you have, and the number of volunteer hours. What I'm showing you on the screen here is great. It's wonderful. Starting January 1, 2020, we had a goal of 2,020 volunteers across the state for all of our programs. We are well over that at a little over 3,100 volunteers with over 98,000 hours. And then you can see it broken down kind of by our programs there. I really think this is only a small percentage of the total volunteer workforce that we have. So I'm really excited about the volunteer impact report that I'm going to be starting to show you guys more of the numbers represented. And I'm really excited for our volunteer efforts in 2021. I think we learned a lot last year, having to adjust, and I think the shock has worn off a little bit, maybe not fully. But I think we're adapting, we're more adaptable, and we can really work to get our volunteers more active in different ways this year. And hopefully, fingers crossed, we're going to have a new normal and go back to somewhat business as usual here in the coming months. Our next webinar is going to be Thursday, February 18th, same time, same place. I don't know if you're at your office or you're at your home. I'm at the dining room table, and I will be here next month as well, where we're going to talk about volunteer recruiting, finding the right fit. And I'm really excited because you guys don't have to listen to me talk. I know a lot of you say that you like listening to me talk, but I'm excited that our very own Keita Cole, who's with us today from the Southwest Area Agency on Aging and Disability, who's also part of the Senior Volunteer Transportation Network, is going to be leading this discussion, giving you her points of view. She's extremely knowledgeable and has a lot of really great experience. So I hope you all will join us next month for Keita. And I want to thank you guys so much for joining me for our first webinar this year. I hope it was, well, I didn't mean to put a lot of pressure on you, Keita. I'm sorry. Let's see, Keita's got a lot of support. Keita's going to do amazing. But thank you all for joining us. I'm going to see many of the same names on our participant list throughout the series this year. We're going from January to September. And we'll have more guest speakers. So I will be sending a follow-up email with all of that information here this afternoon. I'll also be posting the video this afternoon to our YouTube channel. And thank you guys so much again for joining us today. And I'm going to stick around for any questions that you guys might have.